Ready to go live. Hey everybody, we're ready to go live. It looks like we're ready to go live. I'm super excited to be with everybody today. I'm super excited to be here with you today. If you can hear me all right, please give me some thumbs up, some likes, some loves. Let me know that you can hear me okay. I am super excited for you in this next workshop that we're doing today. I'm so excited. Let me, before I forget, because I have a bad habit of saying I'm going to put something in the chat and then I forget to put the links in the chat. And actually, let me make sure that my let me just make sure that my hang on a second. Let me make sure that my now if I have a bad signal and I realize it, I will try my best to like come back wherever I feel like I got out. But if not, then we will try and do this later. But let me go ahead and drop this link in the chat just to make sure I don't forget. What I'm dropping in the link in the chat is where you can go get the guidebook as well as one of the products that I'm going to mention later on, okay, on Amazon. But for those of you who are joining me today, this is a free lesson from our paid Empowered Life Lessons, which was formerly known as Real Success Mentoring Program. It sends a personal growth lesson every 2 weeks. And today we are talking about this great topic of flow. This is actually our 5th Thursday. And so this was the topic I wanted to talk about last week, Thursday, but the internet access at the stadium when I was at the New Orleans Pelicans Veterans Career Fair, my access to the internet didn't work out, and then everything just kind of tumbled together, and so I was not able to broadcast last week like I really thought I would. But let me tell you, that was one of the best speaking engagements I have. I have been doing that for a while now, since before COVID, and I love being part of the Pelicans panel, empowering veterans to be able to take charge of their lives and be able to find the jobs that are a match for both their personality and perhaps their current reality when it comes to disabilities and being a disabled veteran and the realities of being a veteran transitioning into a civilian world that works very differently from the military. So it was a fantastic event. I was bummed that I didn't get to share this with you, not even from the hotel or from the stadium, which was my original intent. I mean, I thought it was going to be so cool to sit at my booth and actually broadcast this for y'all. But then when we had that Pelicans panel, man, it was so powerful. And so I encourage you, if you have access to a career fair like that, the next time it happens, go, especially if they do like the New Orleans Pelicans and they bring in top speakers like myself to come in and help encourage veterans how we and our companies can help them get what they want to get. So today we're going to be talking about flow. And for those of you who are just joining us, again, this mentoring, which is formally and for the last maybe 7 or 8 years has been the Real Success Mentoring Program. If you're in that program, you should have already received your PDF booklet. But if you'd like to get one and you're not already in that program, you can just navigate to jjclink.com/flow. That's jjclink.com/flow. It's only $3 and you'll be able to download a digital copy. You can print it out real quick if you like, and you can follow along the lesson and fill in the blanks. And there's also exercises for you to do as you are considering the content. So it's it's actually really worth like $20, but we're making it available for $3 because I want you to see the value of the Empowered Life lessons. And I want you to see how powerful these lessons can be in opening up opportunities and doors for you to have the success that you desire, the success that you've worked so hard for, right? The success that should be coming to you at this point in life. And some of us, we feel like we have worked so hard. We've worked too hard to be this broke, or we've worked too hard to be this exhausted. We've worked too hard to have nothing to show for it at the end of the day. And it really makes me upset that hardworking women, they give their all at work, they give their all in the ministry, they give their all to their family, and at the end of the day, they've got nothing to show for it. I'm a little bit fired up today because a friend of mine, her besties, lost her husband this week suddenly. And it was one of those things where it took me back to when one of my old friends lost her husband a couple years ago. And since that loss, I've had steady having friends losing husbands, and I don't like approaching that age where my friends are losing their spouses. However, the reality is that's the life. And you're either going to opt out of life or you're going to live life. And if you live life, then the longer you live, the more you're the one experiencing those losses, right? So I was feeling kind of sad for my friend's friend, and then I thought about what a blessing it was. A couple years ago was the first time it happened, and anytime since that my friends have needed me to be there at their time of loss. I have created a life that allows me to drop everything and run to be there with my friends. And I've created a life that allows me financially, physically, emotionally to be able to do that. And I made the comment about it. And one of my friends, I made the comment about this on my post. And one of the comments, I made a post about it. And one of the comments said, well, it's nice to have those opportunities or things like that. And it is nice. And I know that this person is a big fan of creating their life. So I know they're not sitting on the sidelines of their life. But a lot of people who say things like that are actually sitting on the sidelines of their lives, and they're looking at all the benefits and values everybody else has, and they're wondering, when's it going to be my time? Well, it's time for you now to create the processes and to put into practice the strategies, processes, and success stories, strategies, whatever you want to call it, routines that will give you that life later. See, there's a lot of people back in the day who laughed at me for living a frugal life and investing both in real estate and the stock market. In addition to my military retirement, there are a lot of people who poo-pooed that and who spent their money, spent their earnings, spent their income living life large. And even today, there are a lot of people who they ask my advice in real estate, and I'm like, well, here's how I would do it. And they're like, no, I'm not going to do that. And then they are so hamstrung, chained to these properties that they bought in ways that I don't recommend. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that no one makes money with other people's money, that no one makes money leveraging debt. I'm just saying most people find themselves more constrained than they find themselves developing freedom. And so I was pondering this today, and I thought about some of the lessons in my life that really helped me open up this flow of time, space, and money so that I could do the things today that I want to do today. And maybe in your life today, you feel like you work too hard and you're not able to take the time off to be with a friend in need. You're not able to take the time off to be with your family. Well, there are things you can implement today so you can have that life tomorrow. Again, if you are not already a part of my Empowered Life Lessons, which used to be called the Real Success Mentoring Program, all of those folks have access to this already in their portal. But if you don't yet, you can go to jjclink.com/flow. And for just $3, you can get the booklet to this. And then after we're done with the video, we'll extract the audio so you can download it. And we'll put the audio and the video in the course portal. Okay. That's jjclink.com/flow. Now, this is going to be a great, great lesson. And I hope that you will get the guidebook, print it out, not only listen to me tonight and fill in those blanks, but then go through the exercises to really hone in the lesson, because there's really a lot for us to think about here. We're not as much, we're, how do I want to say it? The world has taught us that this is all there is. And I'm here to tell you there's more. There's more there. Les Brown is fond of saying there's greatness in all of us. There is greatness in you. There is greatness in you, and there's greatness in your future if you know how to unlock it. So this lesson is titled Flow. And it's interesting because working through it, the working time, that's what I see a lot of people who come to me. They are walking in restriction. And then it was like, well, do we really want the energy of restriction? Like, maybe I don't want to walk in that energy, right? Because words matter. And what we focus on, how's that saying go? Where your focus goes, your energy flows. Right? So maybe we don't want to focus on the word restriction, right? Because it's not about restriction. It's really more about flow. And it's kind of like the lesson on confusion, like, so later on you're going to see a lesson on clarity. And I want you to know it was really originally titled Confusion. But then I began to study and explore, like these invisible boundaries that are holding me back. And I learned that, at least for me, I could do was latch on to small little bits of truth and then spend time with it, just kind of go deep with the truth, not my feelings, the truth, really unpacking the universal meaning of the truth, but more importantly, that truth's meaning in my life. How do I bring it alive in my life? And so I think that's really important, Do y'all remember when The Secret was everywhere and everything was about the law of attraction? And I remember thinking about that and trying to apply the law of attraction to my life. And like, well, I got this principle of the law of attraction, but I want a house. I want a nice house. I want a house with a lake. I want a house with the beach. Am I actually going to move it? Am I going to attract the house to me? Is the lake's not going to move? The beach is not going to move. So I'm thinking about this, and it's like, well, how do I, that's a nice idea. Probably sells a lot of books and a lot of movies, but how do I actually use it? And that's when I kind of got my head around like this other kind of aspect of consciousness, which I think everyone's experienced, right? Like when you buy a new car. Let me give you this example. When you buy a new car and you're driving down the road, and you just bought an orange car, and suddenly everybody's got an orange, or like a new dog, and now everybody's got that dog, whatever it is. And you might think, well, now I'm attracting these cars to me now. I'm attracting these dogs to me now, right? But that doesn't make sense either. So obviously, people were doing what they were doing before. It, you're not attracting the cars, but what you're doing is you're attracting them into your experience. You're attracting them into your reality. So they were there all the time. You were surrounded by those cars. You were surrounded by orange cars. You were surrounded by that kind of dog, but you were just kind of shutting them out. And so when you think about it in those terms, you can attract things into your reality, or you can block them out of your reality. And so actually, I have met so many people who did end up getting their dream house that they had written out like exactly as they had hoped, right? They did attract that reality into their experience, but the house would have sat where it was for years before they got there. But it was new to them, right? So I think when you think about it in these from how you can use it, it becomes very practical. And it brings alive the idea that Emerson said, where your focus goes, your energy flows. Where your intention is, your attention flows. And you begin to, your mind is expanded to these things. You see those things more, and they have more meaning. So for those of you who've been on in my campus for a while, you may have heard how I internalize and really, my expression of the different universal truths that I've taught in these lessons is certainly through Think and Grow Rich in the lessons we've had on I am and oneness. And by the way, thank you to those of you who purchased that bundle, who's in the lifetime access. Okay, I really do encourage you to go back and listen to those lessons. That's why we made them available for you to download, because they stand alone, but they are building upon one another, right? So go back and listen to them. But I want to share this truth, another truth, or this principle, because it's an understanding based on truth and consideration. And there's this idea of restriction in our life. And now when you go into the dictionary, you begin to look at the word restriction, and there's something really telling there. It'll tell you that restriction is the limitation or control of someone or something, and it's the state of being limited or restricted. And so it's interesting when you hear those words. Restriction is a state of being limited or restricted. It's a state of we're being controlled. And when one is being controlled, then one is out of control, right? And I think most of us would agree, and certainly anyone who's like me, who's a type A, like my kids might say I'm a control freak, but come on, you were given the option to be in control or not in control. I think most of us would choose to be in control. Most of us. And not just humans, y'all, animals as well. There's a lot of research on animals where they were given electric shocks in different circumstances, and they have some degree of control over when it happens. then the pain and the stress that they register is much less for the group that has some control over when the electric shock happens than the ones who feel like it's totally out of control. And how many people, and maybe many of you, want to leave your jobs because they don't like being told what to do by their boss. Most people don't like it, and it can be very stressful. A friend tells a story. One of my mentors tells a story of when he and his friends used to sell fish, right? They would go and get the fish. They go really early, and this him and his friend Dave, and they worked for Dave's brother. They'd go get the fish and sell it at the Blackfish market, and they got paid like 35 pounds for the day. He grew up in England, right? And it was a long day. And it was hard work, but they got paid, right? And one day they got there late, and they ended up with all this fish they couldn't sell. And so they go to his friend's brother, and everyone was like really grumpy and stuff. They didn't know what to do about it. They were really upset. And the brother's like, well, why don't y'all just buy this fish off of us? There was like hundreds and hundreds of pounds worth of fish, right? And the brother was like, well, y'all can just have it. Instead of us paying you, you can have the fish. And so then he and his friend were like, yeah, right. And so it's the end of the day. They're exhausted. But now all of a sudden they're running around. They're stacking it all up. They're putting it in the back of the car. And they spend the rest of the night driving around to all their friends, parents, the pubs, the restaurants, everything, because now they were in control. They were exhausted, but once they were in control, they gained new energy. They had a freezer full of fish at the end of it, but they loved it because they were in control and they were energized and motivated because of that. I think most of us would, at some level, experience an increased measure of anxiety and fear if we lose control. I think one of the reasons we experience these negative emotions of anxiety and fear is because being restricted in any area of our life is not a natural state of being. So I want you to remember what I'm saying here. Restriction, it's a state of being, and it's not a natural state. When we're restricted in our health, that is not a natural state of being. When there's restriction in a neighborhood, I mean in a relationship that we're in, if you find your love being restricted, your giving being restricted, your honesty being restricted, transparency being restricted, these are not natural states of being for the human condition. And if you're restricted spiritually in any way, that is not a natural state of being. So if there's a restriction in the area of your finances, in the full flow and freedom of flow of money in your life or in your business, that is not natural. And one of the things I do when I'm mentoring people, when they're telling me that they're having a tough time growing their business or expanding their business, or they're looking outside market, and I first want to pull them into this idea that it's not a natural state. And so a lot of times we focus on the things, we think about the thing that may be causing this. And you may have heard me talk about this at my women's wealth retreats. I share how one of my former mentors, when I sat down and I started telling him about all the things that are wrong in my business, he asked me, who do you need to forgive? And I'm thinking, what? Restriction is not a natural state of being. It's not congruent with the blueprint that God created for your life. And when we experience this restriction in any area or form, it immediately registers as a foreign object in our spirit and in our awareness. So if someone comes to me and they're like, I'm doing all the things I know how to do, but still the business isn't working. And I've tested the market and I know that people are selling the same thing over here and people are selling this over there. And I've done restriction is not a natural state. And I may well ask you, who do you need to forgive? What is really restricting you? Just as if you ate something unnatural, or your physical body would immediately begin the process of rejecting it, right? This is what happens in our spirit. This state of restriction, this unnatural state of being in our thinking, and what it does is our spirit begins to make us aware of it. And for those, again, who've been part of the study, we talk a lot about living simultaneously on three planes of existence. So in my Bible study, I talk about the three-part man. We go a lot into Watchman Nee, and you find that throughout Scripture. We are a spiritual being. We are gifted with a soul, which is the seat of our personality that includes our intellect, and we are living in a physical body. And so when our spirit registers restriction, it immediately communicates that to our intellectual mind, and our state of thinking begins to cause us to reject that state of mind. And it does it in the form of causing us a very real pain or hurtful feelings. And we experience fear and doubt and worry and anxiety and self-judgment. And all of these negative emotions, they actually really come to serve you. They come pouring into our awareness in hopes that maybe you will move away. Maybe that you will change from accepting this kind of false state of being and whatever's causing it. And one of our most popular master series writers and teachers that we look at, Thomas Troward, he wrote in one of his writings, he said, it is quite a mistake to suppose that we must restrict ourselves in order to develop greater power or usefulness. That is so powerful, isn't it? Think about that. It is a mistake to suppose that we must restrict or stint ourselves in order to develop greater power or usefulness. And he also says, let me just look at this down here. When we're drawing from the infinite, we need never be afraid of taking more than our fair share. See, that's not where the danger lies. The danger lies in us not sufficiently realizing our own richness and seeing the internalized outside conditions as our riches. It's so powerful. It's so powerful. And we were, talking about this idea a little while ago, of this idea that people think, well, yeah, I accept that I'm spiritual. I'm a spiritual being. Spiritual things come to me. I accept that abundance is for me. But do you really believe it? Do you really believe? If you did, would you be playing so small? Would you be so fearful? Would you be afraid of stepping out? And I think sometimes perhaps we think we believe things, but then our actions tell a different story, don't they? Our attitudes and our reactions tell a different story. But when you're drawing from the infinite, you need never be afraid of taking more than your fair share. That's very empowering. And I can think of a story about when I first started teaching, right? I would tell people that I believe that you can be, do, or have anything you want. And I really did believe that for them. I just didn't believe it for me. It's the difference between abundance and prosperity. It's the difference between abundance mindset and prosperity consciousness. Troward says it's a mistake for us to restrict or stint ourselves in order for us to develop a greater power or usefulness. So let's take a little bit of a look of what does that mean? Like, what is he actually saying here? What he's saying here is that we create and develop a learning model, that at a very early age, we are restricting, bringing forward our full potential and giftedness. So he's saying it's a mistake that you should think that you should restrict yourself in order to somehow get your needs met. That's what this sentence is really saying. And we do this all the time to get our needs met, don't we? Especially when we're young, because at a very early age, perhaps one of our greatest needs is acceptance and this need of belonging. And most of us didn't grow up in a home of unconditional love. Most of us did not fit into the dominant culture of influence. And the other 4, 5, and 6, and 7-year-old kids on the playground, most of us didn't have an awareness of God's perfection in our life expressed through us and as us. So for this reason, at an early age, we learn to form a learning model that has us withhold or withdraw our natural state of being, that state of perfection that God wants to express through us. And we begin to bring out the polar opposite of our perfection, and that is this place of restriction. And if we look at the opposite of restriction in our natural state, it's freedom. In our natural state, it's expansion, growing. In our natural state, it's enlargement, increased impact and influence. In our natural state, it's freedom. And you've heard the spiritual essence of who you are, right? The you that is you. We've talked about this before, is your soul. It's the seat of your personality. The you that is you is always seeking fuller expression, always seeking fuller expansion. Now, as children of faith, we are accustomed to yielding that expression to the will of God, to submit that expansion to the will of God. But that's yielding and submission, not restriction. When you are restricting or being restricted or not fully expressing, that is not a natural state for us. And I think it's really worth thinking these things over and over, because it's empowering. Our natural state, and we talked about this before, we don't need to go through unreasonable machinations just to be a better channel for these higher states of living and consciousness to flow through us, because the answers are already there. Everything we need is there, but it's often just outside of our conscious awareness. It's inside us, in the spiritual part of us. And just like the earth is moaning and groaning for the redemption that's yearning in us to be expressed through our soul and our body, it's quietly calling us forward to grow and to be more and to do more. We don't need to find it. We don't need to create it. It is a natural state as one of God's children. We just need to be a better channel for it to flow through us. And I find this very comforting, very inspiring, very empowering. See, I don't have to go out there and find something that I don't know, but I have to be intentional about seeking it. I have to be intentional about removing the blocks to the expansion and expression that God has for me. We need to be very intentional about removing the blocks to allow it to flow. The most important thing we can do is when we identify that we're in a place of restriction, before you jump to the, blame and look for the cause, is just to kind of settle and recognize, this is not a natural state. To take a moment and observe, this is a place of restriction, and it's not how I was created to be. Because see, rarely do we operate from these states of being, right? The states of expansiveness, the states of freedom. We're so often in protection mode. We're protective of having our feelings hurt. And in many cases, protection from even physical abuse, from the schoolyard bully or our siblings or our parents who may be physically or verbally abusing us. And so we seek safety and protection. And one of the ways we seek to protect ourselves emotionally, spiritually, physically, is we make ourselves small. We make ourselves small, and we play small, and we marginalize ourselves, and we shrink away from life. We diminish ourselves by hiding our gifts or by not expressing our thoughts and our feelings, for fear that if we do, we'll stand out and become a larger target to other people's judgment. We would rather operate from this learning model and this belief pattern where we become so attached to what will other people think of me if I step outside and if I stand out. What will other people think of me if I raise my hand or if I try to shine and I fail? What will people think of me? What will they think of me? It's crippling for so many of us, isn't it? It's so crippling. I remember for me, for years, when I first heard what other people think of you is none of your business, I struggled to accept that, because college taught me that what other people think of you is life. And once someone starts a rumor about you, it's all over. What will they think of me? What will other people think of me? What will other people think? What will they say? What will they What other people think of you is none of your business, because it's really not about what they think of you. It's about what you think. And that's important, isn't it? What we think of ourselves. And actually, all we need to do, I think, if we just do our best, we will think well of ourselves when we do our best, whatever the result is, if we do our best. And I find it interesting to say that because I'm not a big fan of the word just, saying just do your best. But I also know that most of the time, and you know this too, most of the time when we say I'm doing the best I can, we know deep down inside we are not doing the best we can. But if you keep doing your best, you'll keep getting better, because your best will keep getting better. And that's the way to move forward. So are you doing your best? That's the question to ask yourself. Maslow said that one of the things to becoming a self-actualizing person is that you need to be free of the good opinion of other people, independent of the good opinion of other people. You got to be independent. Like, we need to be independent, or we need to seek to be independent of the good opinions of other people. So we're not dependent on what they think. And it's really a more classy way of saying it, right? You know, I one of my favorite songs, it should be my theme song for the ministry, right? If you can't help me, please don't stop me. Move out of my way. Don't try and block me. I got a race to run, and I'm running by faith. At the finishing line, I'll see God's face, right? But a nicer way to say it is, I'm seeking to be independent of the good opinion of other people. I remember as a child with an unsavory background and a slow learning affect, right? I learned quickly not to stand out. Other kids didn't want to hear my weird answers, and quite frankly, neither did the teacher. I learned to hide when I earned straight A's, or else be teased mercilessly by the other average children for being a brainy four eyes, or worse, for being so book smart but being so mentally slow. So I learned to stint and restrict myself so I could hold on to my own power, thinking that if I hurt myself by playing small, it was better than allowing myself to be hurt by those other kids. It wasn't until I got older that I learned to create a new learning model. And as I increased in levels of awareness, I was able to shift my beliefs about myself and my ability to communicate with others. Now, I still exhibit neurological symptoms at times, but I no longer allow fear of ridicule to restrict me. In fact, I use my learning struggles to my advantage whenever I share my story with others, so they can see it is possible to overcome their own limiting beliefs. It is a mistake for us to suppose that we have to restrict or stint ourselves in order to bring out our full usefulness. It is a mistake for us to suppose that we have to restrict or stint ourselves in order to bring out our full usefulness. And the reason I did this was because if I hurt myself by playing small, then I took the power away from them to hurt me. You got to beat them to the punch, right? And if you think about this, it's a brilliant strategy of a thinking model for a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old, right? This is a brilliant thinking model for a 7-year-old to create, to get one of their highest needs met, to protect themselves, to find a sense of belonging. But unless you break that model, unless you break that learning model, like when you think about a learning model, the learning model is based on 3 things. It's based on your level of awareness, which isn't very high at 7 years old. It's based on your level of belief and the principles in the model. And what we're always trying to do is we're always trying to make those principles in the model automatic. So our brain makes them into habits. When you're trying to learn anything, okay? So a car, learning to drive a car. My son just got his license and is now driving his car, but it's in my name. All right. You have an awareness of cars. You develop a self-belief about them, like that you can drive. You begin to learn how to drive the car. You learn the principles of pressing the brake and the gas. And after a while of driving, you no longer consciously drive the car. You're just kind of an automatic pilot from then on. So we create learning models of restricting ourselves. And over time, these learning models of making ourselves small, of playing it safe, we now carry them automatically, habitually into our teens and 20s. And it becomes the learning model that really robs us of living our full potential. And in our 30s, it gets played out in the linguistic metaphor, better safe than sorry. And we don't go for that next new opportunity or that promotion. In our 40s and 50s, the unchained learning model of restriction, the unchanged, if we don't change that learning model of restriction formed way back when we were kids and adapted to new information, it becomes the foundation of building resentment against the system. And then we begin to see everything as unfair. And we begin to be harsh critics and harsh scorekeepers against anyone who seemingly has an unfair advantage. And boy, oh boy, we want others to pay their fair share. We want to be the arbiters of fairness. And in our 60s and 70s, if we don't change this learning model, it's the alchemy of our regrets. We realize that we've kind of built our own prison, locked ourselves into the cell, and just handed the keys to the people and conditions and circumstances that were never meant to be our jailers. And then, of course, the model follows us until we die, doesn't it? In our 80s, it's the bitterness of arthritis and clogged arteries and other restrictions that we find in our body temple. I've been volunteering a lot at the nursing home. And think about it. Disease, dis-ease, how it's expressed, and especially in older people. For a lot of us who have disease and restrictions, there's actually no need for it physically. Physiologically, there's no need for most of it. Okay? A lot of it is an expression of internal mental belief that's been created. It's the bodily expression of an internal mental belief that they've created and allowed to restrict them for decades. We were never meant to live a life of restriction in any form or in any area of your life. And one of the ways we break free from these restricted adhesions caused by the scars of our childhood and our adolescence is we raise our level of awareness. And we do that through being in programs like this. We do that through being part of a community of like-minded people. We do that through the contemplation of our oneness with the Lord, that we spoke about in the last lesson. And go back and listen to that if you have access to it. If you don't, reach out to me and we can get you plugged into that program. And I think that if you re-listen to that lesson and the awareness and the presence of this idea, this consideration, is going to deepen your understanding of this process and that awareness. So we need to, you know what? We need to really begin to think. And I mean, really think, not just have mental activity, but a sustained and focused thought on what life really is and what our birthright is. What is God's blueprint for your life? And when we do that, look, I've never led anybody through a purpose, vision, goal retreat, my Reconnect with Yourself retreat, working with people over 3 days. I've never worked with anybody staying in this question of what do you want? Nobody has ever written down that they want more restriction in their life. Nobody's ever written down that they want more blockage, that they want more stagnation. It's always about more freedom. It's always about more flow. It's always about more time with this and more ability to do that, because that's our natural state that's emerging from within us. And really, we don't, as a humanity, people don't like thinking. People don't like thinking, do they? And I think that's why one of the reasons why the Reconnect with Yourself retreat is so good, because they're actually taking time out, 3 days, to be walked through the process of really thinking. Because most people think that mental activity is thinking, and it's really not. Mental activity, really, for most folks, is just other people's ideas that they've adopted or been programmed with or accepted. They watch something on TV and at work the next day, they're spouting out what the talking head said. These are things that are keeping them smaller. And we all have things, don't we? We all have little things, right? But the key is to challenge them, to challenge these ideas, challenge the thinking that comes from that old programming, and really challenge everything so that we can become more conscious, so we can really begin to think for ourselves and think about what it is we do want. Most people don't like thinking. And there's a quote by Bernard Shaw, right? 2% of people think, 3% of people think they think, and 95% of people would rather die than think. It's true, y'all. It's so true. And as you begin to think about what your life is and what being alive really means, just stop and think about what what does that mean? What is life supposed to mean? What does being alive really mean? And we can't help but come to this universal truth of our own being, that you and I are spiritual beings, and that the Spirit of God, your oneness with God, is our lives. That's what our life is. And throughout the universe, the way God created it, life ultimately consists in circulation, not restriction. Whether it's in the physical body of an individual or in the scale of the entire universe. I mean, just look at our solar system. Deep down inside the tiniest atom is still circulation. Circulation is a continual flowing. Now, this just hang with me for a minute. Think about this for a minute, okay? Of the universal word for money. No matter where you travel around the world, the word for money is currency. And the word and meaning of currency we see, and we get the picture of the word current. Currency is the circulation of money as a medium of exchange for the expression of service and value. So the full expression of service, the full expression of value ultimately brings more life to people. And if you think about the word current, and the word picture of a moving body of water can come to your mind, right? This flowing river, this flowing ocean, those are things that flow. The current brings expanded life. Some of us are seeking expanded life, but we don't allow any current to flow through us and to us. Now, if you've never been to Israel, to the Dead Sea, you see pictures of it, you just can't even really believe it. Like as soon as you start to walk in, right, you start to rise up, and you can literally sit. You can lie on your back with your feet and your arms straight up, and you can and it's impossible to sink because there's so much salt. So up you go, right? And it's called the Dead Sea because although it has inflow from the Jordan, there's no outflow. And so because it does not give back, because it does not give, it does not flow. All it does is receive and hoard. Receive and hoard. It's become so toxic that it can't sustain any life. Think about all the systems of our body temples, right, that require circulation. Whether it's a restriction in our bodies, I mean, in any restriction in our bodies, we begin the process of dying when there's restriction. Restriction leads to death everywhere that it's expressed. So if we restrict our breathing, if we restrict our blood flow, we could die very quickly. When we have a restriction in our elimination system, like our kidneys, our liver, our digestive tract, our colon, we can get sick really quickly. And if we're not treated, we might die. We will. So wherever circulation is intended, and there's restriction, and be clear about this. Circulation is intended in your business. Circulation is intended in your life. It's intended in your relationships. It's intended in your spiritual growth. It's intended in your personal and professional development. It is intended there. And when we're not in flow, we're in restriction. We're dying to that. And the heart of all these things is our emotions and our emotional state. And think about our state of emotions, right? Because emotions serve a purpose in the moment, don't they? So anger, for example, would be appropriate to be angry for most people in certain situations. But some people live there. Some people live in anger. And they're kind of stagnating in anger. And all the time, they're seeing the world as a very frustrating and irritating place. And people are infuriating, right? Because that's the way they experience life. Everybody's frustrating and infuriating because they're stuck in that emotion. And the same probably for other emotions: fear, grief, shame, guilt. I've heard once that hate is anger turned inward. And when you don't anger, being angry, and all that in and of itself, those emotions is not necessarily a bad thing, but it should be kind of fleeting, shouldn't it? You don't camp out there. You don't pitch a tent and then break out the hot dogs, because that's leading to being stuck. It's a blockage where those emotions should flow through us and we should move on, but it's stuck. And as we talked about in digestion, stuck stinks. We've got to move through these emotions and allow them to serve their purpose. We are spiritual beings with a soul and a body. Emotions are part of that soul. And if there is restriction in our soul and our emotions, then that hinders the spirit from flowing through our human spirit out into the world. You can have the emotion, sure. Just don't let it have you. Grief is another one. People in grief, of course things are terribly sad, but you can't then live there for the rest of your life. And how many of us as kids, especially those of us with old world families, used to hear aunties talking about back in the day, if one of the uncles passed away, that aunt, no matter how old she was, would have to be in black for the rest of her life, just in grief for the rest of her life. I much prefer what John Maxwell says about celebrating. Well done, celebrate for 24 hours, and then that was yesterday, move on. And it's the same with failure. It's the same with grief. It's the same if we messed up, and I saw that with my son on the football field. You got 2 seconds to be angry about the last play and then reset and move on to the next. And I don't want to minimize grief for anyone. My father passed away 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago. And there's still times where that wave of grief comes over me, and I still miss him so greatly. But I don't camp out there. I feel the emotion. I honor his memory. And I allow it to roll over me like a wave. I allow it to flow. It serves its purpose, keeping him alive in my heart. But I don't camp out there. Stuck stinks. So for those of you who were, sorry, thinking about my dad now. For those of you who were part of our recent Think and Grow Rich study, you heard me teach on a principle about how we do anything is how we do everything. When we have a restriction in the higher sides of our nature, we begin to die in those spaces. And when we have restrictions in our thinking, limitations and restrictions on what we believe is possible for our lives, when we have restrictions on what we believe is possible for our lives, what happens? Our hopes and our dreams die. When we have restrictions in our spirit and our connection with other people, our relationships die. And whenever we have a restriction in our business and in growing our business dies. So we really want to contemplate life, right? We really want to contemplate this. We want to contemplate our oneness with God, with the source of all life and all creation. And we could take some time to search out how this idea of living in flow, rivers of living water is the phrase used in the Bible. And also this concept of flow is in other sacred texts from other religions. We want to take inventory of the 5 key areas of our life. Let's look at our life spiritually. Look at your primary love relationships. Look at the area of personal growth and development. Look at the flow and freedom of flow of time of money. Look at the health of our body temple. We want to really consider and take inventory of these 5 areas. Where do we have restrictions in these areas? And where might we be knowingly or unknowingly withholding or withdrawing any of our natural God-given skills? Where are we unknowingly or sometimes knowingly withholding or withdrawing any of our God-given talents or abilities or resources Even worse, when we do it under the guise of humility. Oh, how the enemy has used the concept of humility to keep so many of God's people from living their fullest expression and the fullest expansion of what God has gifted and talented them to do. And where and how we might, cause there to be a new current. Look for how you can cause there to be a new flow in these areas. Look how you, as a causative being, that is our birthright, right? We are created in God's image. He has given us the ability to create. He's given us the mental faculties to create and to have dominion over these things. God's very first command to Adam was be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth and subdue it and have dominion over every little thing that moves upon earth. Well, guess what? That includes yourself. You have dominion when you operate in flow. So we want to think about where and how we might cause there to be a new current, a new flow in these areas. And what are some of the ways that we can cause a new and magnified circulation in our life? What are some of the gifts and areas of giftedness that you've maybe been holding back on from being able to really fully express yourself? What is a skill or a talent that you haven't brought forward to the world? Because doing so might open you up to ridicule or judgment from the small-minded people who are locked in their own prison cell. In what ways might you be playing small and not taking a risk for fear of suffering a loss? Might you be holding back on charging full price for the values that you bring, for the service that you provide? Are you restricting the flow of income into your business because you're afraid to stand up for the value you bring? You're afraid to be compensated for the true value that you bring. Think about where you might be withholding and restricting the highest expression of love for the fear that if you open up your heart, it might not be reciprocated, and that might make you vulnerable and you'll be open to getting hurt. Or that the love, again, won't be reciprocated at your level of expectation. Think about where in your faith walk might you be restricting asking God for help, asking God to step in your life. And I remember when I first started in the ministry, this was an area I was blind to. I didn't realize I had a major restriction. I was so focused on being obedient to God that I had stopped being dependent on God. And when I lacked dependency on God, I was restricting his ability to flow in my life. And I didn't even know it. Reading my Bible, didn't know it. Praying every day, restricting the flow of the Spirit, and didn't know it. I'm so thankful for spiritual mentors who opened my eyes. And that's really the power of mentorship, isn't it? Those trained ears, they listen. And it's kind of like this. My husband and I, we recently started getting deep tissue massages. So you see that, like these knots of tension in the body in certain spots in the middle of the muscle, right? The knots of tension that the body is holding. And deep tissue is phenomenally useful to free those blockages and release the knot out of the cells. And I knew a little bit of this because I had carpal tunnel surgeries, and part of the physical therapy was they would go into the back and press on those certain spots. I mean, it felt like torture, right? But once they worked that knot out of the back, it reduced the tingling and the pain in my fingers. And I think many of us are getting more comfortable with the idea that our bodies are connected internally, right? So a pain here could be reflective of a problem there. But what we don't often connect is that it's flow of energy and blood restores after they push the trigger point. And now that blood flow is no longer experiencing the restriction of that bundled up muscle. It's free to do what it does, bringing life to our cells and cleaning them of toxins. And deep tissue massage is a great way to stay healthy and relaxing. Okay, maybe not relaxing in the moment you're getting the deep tissue massage, but a couple hours of the next day, you will be amazed at how your body feels because it's removing restriction. Releasing those knots removes the restriction of blood flow. I was in Hot Springs getting a massage at one of those old-fashioned mineral baths and one of those old-fashioned houses that people used to go to back in the day. And the masseuse there, masseuse, is that the right answer? The massage lady told me that the emotional release was core when she worked with the Dallas Cowboys. Now, poor choice of team employer aside, I listened to what she said because she said that when she would work on the athletes and the people who came to the bathhouse, releasing the tension that's locked up in the body with whatever she's doing, she had to encourage them to let it all out because those emotions would be released very often when she's treating them. And so they would burst into tears or all this emotion would flood out. And I had to get over being embarrassed, right? Because in a bathhouse, you're all in this big room and other people can hear you, but it's really true. And Western medicine is only now getting to the point where they're beginning to understand this, but it's obviously being held in the body. The tension is being held in the body. And we talk a lot about forgiveness at the Reconnect with Myself retreat because forgiveness is a big part of it. It's a big part. Forgiveness needs to be there, but guess what? People resist forgiveness. All that bitterness and maybe rage, potentially your anger, all these jealousy, it's held inside and it needs to be freed. It needs to be maybe not physical massage, but it needs to be released in some way. So these negative emotions, they can cause serious blockages in our growth, can't they? And so they need to be released so they can fly. They do their job and then they release. And I think you want to take, I think there's great value in taking gentle inventory, right? So everything I share with you in these lessons is an encouragement to have gentle awareness, not harsh judgment. I'd rather you have gentle awareness rather than harsh judgment, right? And I found one really easy way to do, like if this idea of breaking free the restrictions in your life is new to you, I found that it's best to start where you are. And I'm a simple kind of gal, right? Put the cookies on the bottom shelf. Start where you are. Begin with breaking some patterns of restriction that are easier. And then as you grow in your awareness, then maybe you take on a little more challenging things. Maybe you start with the real simple things that you can do. And for me, I found releasing physical restrictions is a lot easier than removing a spiritual restriction. Cleaning out your old t-shirts, y'all, it's a lot easier than it's a lot easier than a lot of things, okay? All right. So I brought with me two things that I do every day, and there's a couple other things that I do, but I'm still working on implementing them into my life. But these are two things that I do every single day, and I do them as a practice of good health and also as a practice of removing restrictions. So I think it's important when you do these that you really be mindful. It's kind of like in the tithing lesson. I say when you give them the knowledge that you are completing the circuitry of life, that God has blessed you. He's flowed into your life, and now you're taking what he's given you, and now you're seeding that into somebody else's life, and now you're playing your role in that, right? So it's like when we're giving, we're not just giving, as the pay, we're not just, the plate comes by and we just put the money in and pass it. No, 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 no. We're giving in the knowing of what we're doing when we give. We are part of that cycle of flow that God established when he created the universe. So when you do these exercises that I'm going to share with you, I want you to do these two things that I do every day. When you do them for your body temple. But when you do them, don't just do them. Do them in the awareness that this is what I'm doing. I'm removing some restrictions out of my life. And then you'll begin to find other ways to remove other restrictions. But do it with the purpose and the intention that the reason I'm doing this is to remove a restriction and remind myself there's other restrictions I want to release. Okay. So again, this is all about making the unconscious conscious here. So two things that I do, and they don't take very long at all. All right. Like here's a pumice stone, clearly well worn. I tried to find one of my new ones so it could be all perfect for you, but you know what? Perfection is a myth, right? This is a pumice stone. And I've posted a link in the comments. I'm going to go ahead and post it again if I can cut and paste it. It's not letting me cut and paste it. But wait, are we going to put it here? There we go. That's kind of hard to click on. Hopefully in the comments, you'll be able to click on it. All right. But this is a Mr. Pumice bar. It's coarse on one side and it's medium on the other side. And for me, this is just very, very quickly in the shower, right over your whole body. right? It just, that's it. I use the coarse part for the bottom of my feet because they feet. And I use this light side for everything else. Okay. Don't do the extra coarse dark side on the rest of your body. You might hurt yourself. But there's something that I do every day. Okay. And then another thing I have, you're gonna be surprised. Some of you are gonna be surprised that I'm bringing this up, is floss. And I like thieves floss. I don't necessarily like the name, but I like thieves floss. One time I had surgery, I couldn't floss. I used a water pick. And then another time when I was traveling and I didn't have water pick, I used the little plackers. Whatever you use, I recommend you do. If you're going to use a water pick, definitely do that in the shower so it doesn't make a mess, right? It's not as, to me, it doesn't work as well as the floss does. But if you do whatever you can do, okay, let's not be upset about what we can't do. Let's focus on what we can do. And I do love my thieves floss. My son uses the plackers because that's what he can do, right? But these are really simple things you can do that remove restriction. And so, obviously, when you do this, right? When you do this, you're bringing blood and circulation to your skin. Now, you are also sloughing off dead skin, and for a lot of us ladies, we want to have that nice glow. But really, you are you're increasing your circulation. This with intention, it's an anchor. It's an anchor for the fact that you are removing restriction from your life. It is helping you stay in the mindset of, I am removing restriction from my life. And whenever you can find something, small, these are just small things. All of them remove restrictions, and they anchor in our awareness in a really easy, subtle way. And over time, as you begin to do this in the full awareness, while you're flossing your teeth, do it in the full awareness that I am removing restriction. Yes, I am taking better care of my oral health. And yes, I am preventing increased incidence of heart disease. They say heart disease begins in the mouth, right? The plaque and the things that are in here create bacteria that actually interact in our bloodstream. And I'm not a doctor, but I remember reading about this when I first heard about it. I was like, that can't be true. I'm removing restrictions in addition to my health. I am removing things out of my life that restrict my ability to live fully. It is my intention to remove restrictions from every area of my life. And you can think about that while you're flossing or while you are pumicing. And then you will be opening yourselves. Your intention being there opens you up to recognizing more meaningful ways to remove restriction and in more meaningful areas of your life. So just start where you are. Don't wait for, don't think you've got to do some big spiritual practice. Just start where you are. Okay? Here's another one. Doesn't need props. When you have the choice to be right or to be kind, always choose to be kind. Because I think being right, or insisting on being right, or even when you actually are right, making sure everyone knows that you're right, well, I used to do a lot of that, and I found out it's kind of an attachment, isn't it? And that attachment is potentially a blockage. Now, I'm not going to lie, okay? Now, I'm going to offer my opinion. I'm not going to lie to people. I'm going to offer my opinion. But once I've given my opinion, I am no longer attached to the outcome. If I give my opinion or I give my information, I'm not going to do like I used to do back in the day and argue with you till you realize I'm right. If we can let go of that, let go of the need to be right, and let the other person win the argument and be kind, then I think that's important too, as well as a pumice stone and some floss. Okay, I think that's really important. I think it's a really important practice for us to have intentionality in our life. I am intentionally choosing to be kind, even when you know you're right. I know I'm right. I know this person is wrong, but they are not in a place to receive. So I'm going to choose to be kind. I'm going to let the kindness flow to them. Lord knows there have been so many times in my life where someone let their kindness flow to me. All right, y'all. Well, that's what we've got today. That's been a great lesson. Oh my goodness, I love this lesson. It's such a simple idea, but honestly, if you keep thinking about this, you're going to find it is so powerful. I mean, we've talked about learning models. And I think what all of us are really trying to do at any given moment in our life, we are trying to go from a place called here to a place called there, right? We're trying to navigate to our next highest level, to our next calling, and the next thing that God is bringing us forward to. And to go from here to there requires new learning models. And each of these learning models is based on our level of awareness, our level of beliefs, and the principles in the model. And so what we're sharing through this program and in this community is a learning model of awareness, a learning model of how do I stay in the practice of the full presence and awareness of my, and how do we bring forward God's calling, God's purpose, God's intention for our lives. And this is a simple idea. And we could call this a principle in the learning model. You know, the I am is a principle. The oneness lesson, that was a principle. Think and Grow Rich teaches 13 principles. They're principles in a learning model of achievement. And that's really what we're hoping to do with these lessons, is to share. You know, sometimes there might be a deeper lesson, sometimes maybe a longer lesson, but each one of these is a principle of gentle awareness. And so I think the thought that maybe I'm going to take for this today is that when you are, remember what we said earlier, when you are drawing from the infinite, you never need to be afraid of taking more than your fair share. Let it flow. Don't play small. Let it flow. Be kind to yourself. And remember that it is a mistake to assume that if you restrict or stint yourself, if you create a model of intentionally marginalizing or diminishing yourself and your voice, if you're intentionally withholding bringing forward any of your God-given skills, talents, and abilities in some way to get some need met or to protect yourself, there are so many more productive ways for you to get your needs met than thinking that you need to restrict or stint your growth in order to do that. You don't need to do that. Be who you are. Be the best version that you can be. And tomorrow, be a better version. And you will be. Increment in baby steps. Think in little gains. And remember, slow progress is still progress. Oh, y'all, this has been fun. This has been fun. Great stuff. Wonderful lesson. I hope you liked it as much as I do. Now, look, if you're not in my Empowerment Life lessons, which used to be called the Real Success Mentoring Program, the booklet to this lesson is already in your portal if you are. But if you're not and you'd like a PDF book, just go to jjclink.com/flow. You can, it's only $3. It'll provide immediate digital download. You can print it out. You can work through the exercises or just look at them and work through the exercises. They will bear fruit in your life. And then once we process this recording, it takes a day or two, then we'll upload that as well. And you'll be able to download the MP3 and listen to it forever. It's just $3, y'all, just $3. All right. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Y'all take care and be blessed.